There is a small, rocky, unimpressive hill in the highlands of the southern Levant. It is not particularly high. It is not particularly fertile. It sits inland, far from the sea. It has no great river. The land around it is too dry for easy farming and too uneven for easy roads. By any sensible measure, nothing important should have ever happened on this hill. Instead, more battles, sieges, conquests, prophecies, prayers, miracles, slaughters, riots, conversions, exiles, returns, and arguments about God have happened on this single small hill than on any other place on the surface of the earth. 3 of the great religions of the world claim it as their most sacred place. 40 civilizations have ruled it. It has been destroyed completely, by some counts, at least twice, and damaged severely many more times. Its name is Jerusalem. And what follows is the entire history of this hill, told in the rhythm of the armies that have, again and again, walked over its crest, carrying weapons and flags. The hill stays. Everything else burns and rebuilds itself, century after century. Let us watch them come. Using advanced AI trained on the archaeology of the city of Jerusalem in its many layers, the ancient inscriptions and tablets of the kingdoms that ruled it, the texts of the Hebrew Bible, the New Testament, the Quran, and the chronicles of Jews, Christians, and Muslims across the centuries, and the modern scholarship that has worked to reconstruct who was actually here and when, we will walk through this history at a brisk and faithful march. We begin nearly 4,000 years ago. The first city. Around the year 1800 BC, before any of the great religious stories we associate with Jerusalem were yet written, the hill is already inhabited. Small Canaanite tribes farm and trade in the highlands. A modest fortified settlement has grown up on the spring-watered slopes of what will later be called the City of David, a ridge running south of where the great temples will one day stand. The Egyptians, who dominate the region, know it by the name Jerusalem. The kings of this small place pay tribute to whatever larger power happens to be in charge. A man named Abraham, according to the tradition shared by Jews, Christians, and Muslims, will pass through this region somewhere around this same time, and a much later story will describe him climbing a hill to make the most painful sacrifice imaginable to his God. The exact hill is disputed. Tradition will eventually locate it at the very crest of Jerusalem, the place that will, 3,000 years later, still be the most fiercely fought-over piece of real estate in the world. David. Around 1000 BC, a confederation of Israelite tribes united under a charismatic warrior king named David captures the small Canaanite city on the hill. David moves his capital here precisely because it sits on the border between his northern and southern tribes, a neutral political ground. He brings a sacred wooden box, the Ark of the Covenant, said to contain the stone tablets of the law given to Moses, and installs it on the hill above his palace. His son Solomon, around the middle of the 10th century BC, builds a great stone temple to house the Ark, on a flattened platform on the highest point of the city's ridge. The temple is panelled in cedar from Lebanon, decorated with carved cherubim and gilded with gold. It will be the religious centre of the Israelite kingdom for nearly 4 centuries. The kingdom eventually splits into 2. The southern half, called Judah, keeps Jerusalem as its capital, and the city continues to grow, fortifying its walls, building palaces, expanding into the surrounding ridges. The hill is now sacred. The hill is also, for the first time, on the map of the empires. Nebuchadnezzar. In 587 BC, the Babylonian armies of King Nebuchadnezzar II crest the hills around Jerusalem and besiege the city. The siege lasts nearly 2 years. Famine sets in. The walls eventually crack. The Babylonians enter, sack the city, and burn the Temple of Solomon to the ground. The royal family is killed or blinded and dragged in chains to Babylon. A large portion of the population of Judah, particularly the educated and skilled, is forcibly resettled in Babylon, where they will sit by the rivers of the city and weep in the famous psalm when they remember Zion. The hill stands empty of its temple for the first time in nearly 400 years. Cyrus. Half a century later, in 539 BC, the Babylonian Empire itself falls to the Persians under Cyrus the Great, who, with extraordinary political genius, allows the exiled Jews to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. The Second Temple is built on the same hill, on the same platform, on a more modest scale than Solomon's. The Persians rule the region with a light touch for 2 centuries. Alexander. In 332 BC, the armies of Alexander the Great, sweeping across the Near East from Macedonia, take the region. When Alexander dies young, less than a decade later, his empire fractures and Jerusalem falls under the rule of one of his successors, then another, as the Greek-speaking kingdoms of Egypt and Syria struggle over the Levant. Greek culture pours into the region. Some Jews embrace it, many do not. In the 2nd century BC, a Hellenistic king named Antiochus IV attempts to suppress Jewish religious practice altogether, even erecting an altar to Zeus inside the Second Temple. The revolt that follows, led by a family of priestly warriors called the Maccabees, drives the Greeks out and rededicates the temple. This rededication is the origin of the festival of Hanukkah, still celebrated today. For about a century, an independent Jewish kingdom rules the hill. Pompey and Herod. In 63 BC, the Roman general Pompey arrives. Rome has come to the Levant. Pompey enters Jerusalem with his legions and, to the horror of the Jewish priests, walks directly into the Holy of Holies of the temple, the innermost room which no one but the high priest is permitted to enter and which is supposed to contain only silence. He looks around, finds it empty, and walks back out. The contempt of the act burns into Jewish memory. Rome rules through a client king, Herod the Great, who rebuilds the Second Temple on a scale even Solomon could not have imagined, expanding the platform on which it stands into a vast paved terrace, the Temple Mount, which still survives today, 2,000 years later, as the largest religious structure in the ancient Middle East. Jesus. Around the year 30 AD, a wandering preacher from Galilee arrives in Jerusalem for the Passover festival. He overturns the tables of the money changers in the temple courtyards. He is arrested. He is tried by the local authorities and handed over to the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate. He is crucified outside the city walls, on a low hill called Golgotha. He is buried in a nearby rock-cut tomb. His followers will claim within days that the tomb is empty and that he has risen from the dead. Within a few centuries, his followers will be the official religion of the Roman Empire itself. The hill of Golgotha and the tomb will, in time, be enclosed inside a great church built by the Romans on the order of the first Christian emperor. The hill has acquired a second great religious meaning. Titus. In 70 AD, after years of brutal Jewish revolt against Roman rule, the legions of the Emperor Vespasian's son Titus storm Jerusalem. The Second Temple is burned to the ground. The Romans cart away its sacred objects, including the great 7-branched lampstand, the menorah, in a triumphal procession in Rome, which will be carved onto a great arch that still stands in the Roman Forum. The Jewish population of the city is killed or scattered. A few decades later, a new Jewish revolt under a leader named Bar Kokhba is crushed even more savagely. The Emperor Hadrian rebuilds the city as a Roman colony, renaming it Aelia Capitolina, banning Jews from entering it, and planting a Roman temple on the very platform where Solomon's temple once stood. For nearly 2,000 years from this moment, there will not be a Jewish kingdom of Jerusalem. Constantine and Helena. In the early 4th century AD, the Roman Empire embraces Christianity under the Emperor Constantine. His mother, Helena, travels to Jerusalem and identifies the sites associated with Jesus. A great basilica, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, is built over the supposed location of the tomb. Pilgrims begin to pour into the city from every corner of the now Christian Roman world. The hill becomes the holiest place in Christendom. the Muslims. In 638 AD, only 6 years after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, an Arab Muslim army arrives at Jerusalem. The city, by negotiated surrender, opens its gates to the Caliph Umar. He enters the city with quiet dignity, refusing, by tradition, to pray inside the Holy Sepulchre Church because he fears later Muslims would claim the building as a mosque. Within a generation, the Muslim rulers of the city build a magnificent shrine on the empty platform of the old Temple Mount, the Dome of the Rock, with its blazing golden dome marking the spot from which, according to Islamic tradition, the Prophet ascended to heaven during his night journey. Beside it rises the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The hill has now acquired its third great religious meaning, 3 monotheisms sharing one rocky ridge. The Crusaders. In July 1099, the armies of the First Crusade, summoned from Western Europe by the Pope after 4 hard years of marching and fighting, crest the hills around Jerusalem. They besiege the city for weeks. They eventually break in through the walls. What follows is a massacre that, even by the standards of medieval warfare, horrifies chroniclers across the world. The Crusader Knights kill perhaps thousands of the city's Muslim and Jewish inhabitants in their narrow streets, by some chronicled accounts even slaughtering refugees who had taken shelter inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque. A Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem is established, holding the hill and parts of the surrounding region for nearly a century. Saladin. In October 1187, the great Kurdish Muslim general Saladin, having reunified much of the Muslim Middle East, retakes Jerusalem from the Crusaders. Unlike the original Crusader entry, Saladin's reconquest is, by both Christian and Muslim accounts, restrained. He allows Christians to leave with their lives and much of their property. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is restored to Muslim worship. Saladin's chivalry will be remembered by his enemies for centuries. The Mongols and the Mamluks. The 13th century brings new horrors and new rulers. Mongol armies sweep through the Middle East in the 1250s, sacking Baghdad and pushing toward the Mediterranean. A new dynasty of Egyptian slave soldier kings, the Mamluks, defeats the Mongols and takes control of the region, including Jerusalem. They will rule the city for over 2 centuries, building schools, fountains, and mosques along its narrow streets. The Ottomans. In 1517, the armies of the Ottoman Sultan Selim I take the Levant. The great Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent will, a generation later, rebuild the walls of Jerusalem in their famous current form, the high crenellated walls that still ring the old city today. The Ottoman Empire will rule Jerusalem for 400 years, the longest single political period in the city's modern history. Under Ottoman rule, the various religious communities of the city, divided into Jewish, Christian, and Muslim quarters, live in a complicated, sometimes tense, often workable mosaic. Napoleon. In 1799, Napoleon Bonaparte, briefly campaigning in the Holy Land, comes near to Jerusalem. He never enters it. The city stays Ottoman, but the modern European interest in the Holy Land has been awakened, and the next century will see an explosion of pilgrims, missionaries, archaeologists, scholars, and consuls from every European power, all of them quietly competing for influence in the city. Allenby. In December 1917, in the closing year of the First World War, British forces under General Edmund Allenby take Jerusalem from the Ottomans, who have allied with Germany. Allenby, mindful of the religious symbolism, enters the city on foot through a side gate, removing his hat in respect. Jerusalem becomes the capital of the new British Mandate over Palestine, a complex and ultimately tragic political experiment which attempts to govern the region while 2 national movements, Jewish Zionism and Arab nationalism, both lay claim to it. 2 states, 1 hill. In 1948, in the wake of British withdrawal and the United Nations partition plan, the State of Israel declares its independence and war breaks out across the region. Jerusalem is divided. The new Israeli state holds the western half. The Kingdom of Jordan holds the eastern half, including the Old City and its 3 great holy sites. The dividing line cuts through the heart of the city. In 1967, in the Six-Day War, the Israeli army captures the eastern half, including the Old City. Israeli soldiers reach the Western Wall, the last surviving remnant of the Great Herodian platform, the holiest accessible site in Judaism, for the first time in 19 years. Photographs of soldiers weeping at the wall become some of the most iconic images of the 20th century. Israel will declare a unified Jerusalem as its capital. The international community will largely refuse to recognize the Eastern annexation. The Palestinians will continue to claim Eastern Jerusalem as the capital of a future state of their own. The dispute is, at this writing, unresolved and one of the deepest fault lines in the politics of the modern world. The hill today. Look at the hill now. The Western Wall stands where it has stood for 2,000 years, scrubbed smooth by the foreheads and the hands of millions of worshippers. Above it, on the platform, rises the Golden Dome of the Rock, one of the most beautiful buildings ever raised by human beings, sacred to 1.5 billion Muslims. A short walk away, beneath the patched dome of the Holy Sepulchre, 6 Christian denominations share the holiest site in their faith under an arrangement so ancient and so delicate that a Muslim family has, by long tradition, held the key to the church's front door for centuries, to keep any single Christian group from claiming exclusive control. Tourists with cameras walk in lines through the narrow stone streets, past pilgrims weeping in foreign languages, past soldiers with rifles, past Israeli teenagers and Palestinian children and ultra-Orthodox men in fur hats, and Franciscan friars in brown robes and Greek Orthodox priests in black, all of them on this same small hill. That was the entire history of Jerusalem. A small rocky ridge in the highlands of the Levant, which has been conquered, sanctified, destroyed, rebuilt, and reconquered more times than any other piece of ground on the planet. Babylonian, Persian, Greek, Roman, Christian Roman, Muslim Arab, Crusader, Muslim again, Mamluk, Ottoman, British, Israeli. So many flags have flown over this hill that no one has bothered to count them all. The wars are not finished. The arguments are not finished. The prayers are not finished. The pilgrims keep coming. The hill stays. If you stand on it today, the wind blows in off the Judean hills the same way it has blown for 4,000 years, smelling of dust and olive trees and stone, and the same low ridge runs down toward the Kidron Valley, and the same sun sets behind the same horizon. Empires come, empires go. The hill is still there waiting for whoever crests it next.